9 acres of floor space rest under 3.5 acres of roof in Weston, West Virginia. The walls are hand-cut blue sandstone quarried nearby and dressed by stonemasons brought from Germany and Ireland. It is the largest hand-cut stone masonry building in North America. Almost nobody outside the state knows its name. The building is the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, though for most of its life it was called Weston State Hospital. Construction began in 1858 and did not finish until 1881. A clock tower rises 200 feet above the central block, finished in 1871, visible for miles across the valley. It was built to hold 250 patients. Read that again because the proportion is the whole story. 250 people housed in a structure later ranked, by some accounts, the second largest hand-cut stone building on Earth, behind only the Kremlin. The math sits oddly from the very start. I want to be careful here because there is a clean, documented, entirely reasonable explanation for all of it, and I do not want to wave it away. It has a name and a founder and a published book. Most of what you are looking at descends from one man's idea. The man was Thomas Story Kirkbride, a Quaker physician in Philadelphia, born in 1809. In 1854, he published a book with a long title about the construction and arrangement of hospitals for the insane. It became, for the next half-century, the working blueprint for how America built its asylums. Kirkbride believed in what was called moral treatment. The idea was that madness could be soothed, even cured, by environment alone, by light, by fresh air, by order, by beauty. Build something serene and dignified, the theory went, and the disordered mind would slowly reorder itself inside it. So the wings were staggered, set at angles, so that every room caught sunlight and cross-ventilation. The grounds were landscaped into gardens. The architecture was not decoration. It was meant to be the medicine itself. That is the official account, and I find it genuinely beautiful, and I believe most of it is true. And for a while it seems to have worked, or at least to have been believed in completely. Early reports describe patients calmed by the gardens, the music rooms, the airy wards. Kirkbride was no cynic. He gave his life to this. The dream was real before it failed. By 1890 something, like 70 of these buildings stood across the United States, and by some counts close to 300 across North America before the movement ended. They were sources of civic pride. Towns competed to host them. This is all well documented, and none of it is in dispute. Here is where I slow down. The first thing that does not sit right is not a hidden document or a suppressed record. It is the buildings themselves, and specifically the gap between what they were meant to do and what they actually physically were. A facility for 250 patients does not require 9 acres of floor under 3.5 acres of roof. It does not require the second largest stone building in the world. Moral treatment asked for light and air. It did not, anywhere in the book, asked for a palace, and these were palaces. Walk up to Weston today and the word that comes to mind is not hospital, it is castle. Visitors say it again and again, unprompted, that it looks like a castle from the outside and a prison from within. The exterior promises something the function never needed. You could answer that with ambition. Victorian institutions liked to announce themselves. Grandeur signalled seriousness, attracted funding, reassured the public that the insane were being handled with dignity. A big stone building was a civic boast. I have sat with that explanation for a long time, and it covers a great deal. What it covers less well is the consistency, because Weston is not unique. Go to Buffalo, New York, and you find the Buffalo State Asylum for the Insane, designed by Henry Hobson Richardson, with grounds laid out by Frederick Law Olmsted, the same man who built Central Park. Richardson's asylum has twin towers over a central administration block, raised in Medina red sandstone, in a style so distinctive it was later named after him. It was the largest commission of his career. He died in 1886, before it was finished. The full wingspan was not completed until the 1890s. Different state, different architect, different stone, different decade, different politics, and yet the same essential thing emerges: a colossal, towered sandstone monument, built far past the scale its stated purpose required, set in landscaped grounds, following the same plan. The repetition is what unsettles me. Pull the camera back further and the shape keeps repeating. In Ohio, in Massachusetts, in New Jersey, in dozens of states that shared no treasury and answered to no single capital, each one raised its own stone leviathan. Each insisted in granite on permanence. The map slowly fills with them. One genius with a good book could explain one masterpiece. He cannot explain dozens of them, scattered across rival states, each one monumental, each one overbuilt, each one raised in materials and at a scale that strain the budget of the function they supposedly served. Genius does not replicate that cleanly. Let me give the mainstream its strongest case, because it deserves one. Kirkbride's book was specific. Its standardized floor plans, ventilation, the staggered wings, the proportions. Architects copied it deliberately. Uniformity is exactly what you would expect when everyone is working from the same widely circulated manual. That is not a mystery. That is influence. I accept that almost entirely. The floor plan, the wings, the orientation towards sunlight. Yes, that is a manual being followed. But a manual tells you how to arrange rooms. It does not tell you to quarry mountains, to import stonemasons by the boatload, to raise towers no patient would ever need. The excess is not in the book. The excess is the question. And once you start looking past the floor plans and toward the sheer surplus of these places, other small things begin to surface, none of them damning on its own, all of them quietly pointing the same uncomfortable direction. Take the self-sufficiency. Weston grew its own vegetables, kept a dairy herd, ran an ice plant, made its own clothing, curtains, mattresses, and most of its furniture on site. It had a reservoir and drew fuel from a nearby coal mine. It was, in effect, a small, sealed city. The standard reading is the 19th century ideal of the self-sustaining institution, where patients learned trades and the asylum carried its own weight. Reasonable, documented, and yet the result is a structure engineered for total independence from the world outside, capable of feeding, clothing, warming, and watering itself indefinitely. Buffalo, meanwhile, was promised by its city a perpetual free supply of pure Niagara water, 100 years of it, written into the bid the city made to win the asylum. A century of free water, guaranteed in advance, for a hospital. Plan that far ahead, and the timescale itself starts to feel strange. None of these facts is secret. That is what I want you to sit with. I am not reading you a coded map or a buried archive. Every number I have given you is on a plaque, in a brochure, on a tour. The strangeness is hiding in plain, public, well-lit view. So let me try the hardest counter-argument of all. The one I think is genuinely strong. Materials and labour were cheap. Stone was local. Convict labour built Weston. Prisoners cut and hauled the sandstone. Land was empty and vast. Of course they built big. Building big was, for once, affordable. That is true, and it matters, and it explains much of the scale, but cheap labour explains volume, not intention. It tells me how they could afford to raise something enormous. It does not tell me why the enormous thing needed 200-foot towers, cathedral proportions, and the deliberate silhouette of a fortress. I keep testing myself here because this is precisely the terrain where reasonable doubt slides into pattern hunger, where the mind starts seeing design in coincidence. So I ask plainly, am I just impressed by old big buildings? Plenty of cathedrals are huge and old and nobody whispers about them. The difference is the mismatch, and it does not touch the deeper problem, which is the one that actually keeps me awake. The official story has these buildings raised from nothing by ordinary 19th century crews, and then, within a few generations, treated as impossible to maintain, too costly to keep, fit only to be torn down. Think about that asymmetry. We are asked to believe a society could quarry mountains and raise the second largest stone building on earth with hand tools and convict gangs, and that the same society's far richer descendants, with cranes and power tools, could not keep the roof from caving in. Across the country, the pattern is brutal and consistent. Danvers in Massachusetts demolished, Wings at Buffalo torn down, building after building condemned, gutted, levelled, or left to rot, until rot made the decision for everyone. The structures that were too grand to explain became, conveniently, too ruined to save. I have to be fair again, because demolition has an obvious explanation too. The asylums became overcrowded horrors. Weston, built for 250, held 2,600 by the 1950s. The moral treatment dream curdled into warehousing, lobotomies, neglect. People wanted the buildings gone because of what happened inside them. That is real, and it is the part of this story I least want to wave away, because it was genuine human suffering, not a prop. The asylums earned their terrible reputation. I am not pretending the cruelty was staged. I am only noting which kinds of buildings ended up erased, and which did not. Because the cruelty happened inside ordinary state hospitals too, plain brick boxes, nothing remarkable about them. Those we mostly forgot quietly. It is the monumental ones, the stone palaces that don't fit their own story, that drew the wrecking ball with such strange reliability. The grandest was so often the first to vanish. Now widen the lens and tell me if you see what I see. We have, scattered across competing states with no shared government, and often open hostility between them, a single coherent building program, same scale, same stone, same towers, same self-sufficiency, same eventual erasure. That uniformity is the thing demanding an explanation. The easy answer is the book, Kirkbride's manual, copied everywhere. But a manual is a floor plan, not a budget, not a quarry, not a mandate to build cathedrals for the mad. Something coordinated the excess that the manual never specified, across institutions that agreed on almost nothing else. And here is where I have to be most honest with you, because this is exactly where careless minds invent a villain. They picture a meeting, a hidden hand, a single author of the whole design, quietly signing off on the towers. I do not believe that, and I have looked hard for it. There is no document ordering the grandeur. There is no committee. What there is instead is something subtler and in a way more disturbing, a set of shared assumptions so total that thousands of separate decisions made by rival men in rival states all bent toward the same impossible result, without anyone needing to conspire. The silence works the same way. No one had to suppress the question of why a hospital for 250 needed 9 acres of floor. The question simply never got asked, because everyone already shared an answer that made the asking feel unnecessary. Consensus does not require a conspiracy. It only requires agreement. Compare it to language. No committee decided how English would sound, yet millions of separate mouths converged on the same grammar without a single meeting. Institutions drift the same way. A shared dream can organize a continent's worth of stone without one order ever being written down. That is not comforting. It is worse. That is the part one cannot get comfortable with. Not a cover-up, a coordination that needed no coordinator, a whole continent of builders reaching independently for a scale and a permanence that their stated purpose never called for, as though they were all working from a memory none of them could quite name. The Tartaria question, when people raise it, usually arrives too loud. They talk about a lost worldwide empire, erased from the record, its buildings inherited and reassigned to lesser people who only pretended to have built them. I find most of how that case gets argued careless, overreaching, and easy to dismiss. But strip away the noise, and underneath sits a small, stubborn, legitimate observation that the loudness almost ruins. The observation is this: there are structures on this continent whose scale, craft, and permanence sit uneasily against the official account of who built them, when, and why. That observation does not go away, and notice what the official story asks in exchange for dismissing it. It asks you to accept that a culture which built like this, for the ages in dressed stone with towers, also lost, within a single century, the will and the ability to maintain what it made. A strange forgetting. You do not need a lost empire to feel the weight of it. You only need to stand in front of Weston with its 9 acres of stone and hold 2 facts at once. It was built, supposedly for 250 troubled souls, and built, unmistakably, to outlast everything around it. I have tried, genuinely, to make the discomfort dissolve. Cheap labour, civic pride, Kirkbride's manual, the self-sufficiency ideal, the overcrowding that justified the demolitions, each one is real, each one explains a piece. Laid side by side, they cover most of the surface, and still a residue remains. The residue is the surplus, the towers no patient required, the permanence no budget demanded, the fortress silhouette wrapped around a garden hospital, the continental sameness across hostile borders, and the quiet, reliable way the grandest of these buildings were the ones that ended up gone. Subtract every reasonable cause, and that residue still stands. I am not going to tell you what it means, because I do not know, and the people who claim to know are exactly the ones I trust least. I would rather hand you the residue intact than wrap it in a story it cannot carry. The honest position is to keep looking. So here is what I would ask of you, and it costs nothing. The next time you pass one of these places, and most regions have one, abandoned, repurposed, or torn down within living memory, stop. Look at the stone, look at the scale, then look carefully at the date. Ask yourself, plainly, whether the building in front of you matches the story you were told about who raised it, and with what, and for whom. Most of the time, perhaps it will, but the times it does not are not noise, they are a door, and I have only just found the handle.